Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. We have a great one for you, as always, back like we never left after about a week or so break, just found like today might just be this, pretty nice Friday afternoon to make a podcast and kind of return to talking about the news again. It's been too long, it's been a week, but it feels like a month. So much stuff has gone on, and we will be covering it all on today's show. We start with COVID-19 live updates. Unvaccinated Americans are now 11 times more likely to die of COVID. The CDC has officially reported. They've done the numbers, and that is what it has come down to, the pro-vaccination advantage. What you get from getting the vaccine is you are 11 times less likely to die of COVID. Also, we're talking about this big Biden vaccine mandate that is causing a lot of drama in Republican circles. He is saying every single business over 100 people has to mandate vaccines or face penalties from the government. Republicans and Republican governors freaking out about that, sending innumerable court challenges their way, and the question is, what will the Supreme Court do about it? And we have something for you on that Supreme Court, by the way. Justice Stephen Breyer did recently an interesting interview with NPR, and boy, oh boy, he has not changed his pomposity, his arrogance, or lack of awareness for the situation. Also, a recall poll shows Gavin Newsom is likely to survive, and a reflection from the one and only Jon Schwarz on 9/11, 20th anniversary, of course, being tomorrow. We do have a great show for you here today, and we're of course not live actually, but recording today from a little undisclosed location, but we are going to get right into it. So honestly, something that should not be surprising to anyone who's paid pretty much remote attention to what's going on here, and of course that is, we see a vaccine situation that has been so the vaccines, we see little inklings of it in various stories, how effective they are preventing, of course, serious illness and death from COVID, but this comes obviously a day after President Biden issued broad vaccine mandates aimed at propelling American workers to get the vaccine against the coronavirus. Federal health officials released a handful of studies highlighting how effective the shots are at preventing infection. So kind of a coordinated effort here. You can kind of see this policy announcement coming with a little bit of scientific backing from public health institutions. But the question is, will those people trust, CDC studies and be reading them up all the time? And that is something that I do not know about. I doubt it to a certain degree. 3 studies that drew data from different U.S. regions evaluated the protective power of vaccines. One looked at more than 6,000 virus cases in 13 states, representing about 1/4 of the U.S. population between April and July, and concluded that individuals who are not fully vaccinated were far more susceptible to infection and death from the virus. Yeah, so honestly, a lot of stuff that, people who are pretty much pro-vaccine already knew, and coming from sources that I really do not know, how pro-vaccine, or, the vaccine skeptics are going to look at this. So that's obviously going to be the real question. This whole coordinated government effort will pretty much put any, little trust that those people especially have in the government up to the test for sure. Vaccine protection against hospitalization and death remains strong, even when the Delta variant was dominant form of infection. But the vaccine's effectiveness in preventing infection dropped from 91% to 78%. The study found the studies underscore a series of similar findings in recent weeks. As we have shown in study after study, vaccination works, says Dr. Rochelle Walensky of the CDC. As more and more Americans are becoming vaccinated, experts say there's always experts always expected that immunized patients or people would require a greater percentage of hospitalized patients. And what she says is, what I want to reiterate here is it's still well over 90% of people who are in the hospital who are unvaccinated. So we still have more than 10 times the number of people in the hospital who are unvaccinated compared to vaccinated, she said, talking about the big disparity. And now, of course, we get that number, that 11 times number, you're 11 times more likely. And I think that's a number that should be repeated, because 11 times, I think, it lands as a big number, a big factor. We can really kind of tell and get the sense that, you got to take some action on this. Otherwise, you're not going to be, you're missing out on something good, something that could really genuinely actually help you. So it's going to be interesting to see what course, they take here. But really, and the question is the American people, because Biden, really pushing his law cannot get to, because the interesting part of this, of course, is, we can't do too much more on the public health crisis front than, more of a wait and see, just like, see, hopefully people take it up, we like to see that happening. Personally, I'm really I just cannot understand a position that would be, anti-vaccine. I'm skeptical of a lot of the same people. I really hate how it's been distributed, how it's been made. Not, in terms of the scientific aspect, but in terms of how it's been put out by people but I don't think, I think people like Pfizer, people like Bill Gates are so certain and so intent on keeping this vaccine for the people who can pay for it, not for everybody. Like that to me has been a far bigger blight, that to me is the problem I have with the vaccine. And the way it's really it's the way it's been distributed. And a lot of that is, again, from Bill Gates and people like Albert Bourla, CEO of Pfizer. So that has been really, really my only big problem with it. I completely understand that, but I think it just makes no sense to say, okay, then, it's ineffective. I don't think that is just backed up, and, it's clearly worked. I do think you can cut down on a lot, but not all, of the skepticism by, raising the temperature a little bit, like Biden is doing here. It's going to be interesting to see, if he goes further, what's the reactions going to be, and politically, is this going to polarize things a little bit? Are we going to see a bit of a movement, in places like the suburbs where people, Republicans really lost a lot of support. They lost key areas in there to the Democrats. And the question is, will this push more people away, this by forcing the Republican Party to really take a hard line on against vaccines? Would that push those voters, those pro-vaccine voters, further towards the Democrats by, separating the kind of contradictions? Ryan Graham actually was very interestingly tweeting a bit about this, and we're going to take a look at this, but Ryan pretty much making that point that, there could be a bit of a, it could be tough, it could be a very big political mistake, but really energize the Republican base. But with the Democrats, they've shown actually an ability, we'll get a little bit later, to actually get it out, motivate voters, at least in California. But, if I can find it here, it was very, very well put, pretty much saying what it could be, pretty much saying what I said. That was making the point about how this could actually be a bit beneficial, more than you may. Here, this is what it is. So the Republican reaction is why he's doing this, not workplace safety. That's from a tweeter called @WhiteOfThePost. And then Ryan Grimm says, yes, I think this is a big part of the announcement. Biden is debating the Republicans to go full anti-vax and get crushed in the suburbs. The model for what Democrats want to do to Republicans actually is Virginia, start winning the suburbs and have the remaining swing with the GOP swing wildly extreme, which moves from the burbs from 45 to 70-30 and grows from there. Which is, what it gets to places like suburban Georgia, places that really made Virginia blue over the years with this really rapidly expanding, pretty diverse suburban populations. And, the way that is now, that's really contributed a lot to why Biden won Virginia so easily. And if you can push that pattern time and time again, that may be pretty instructive and helpful for Biden, pretty much pushing at exactly what he would want to do. So let's take a look at this clip here, though. This is probably one of the most annoying people, Joe Biden, talking about, unveiling sweeping mandates. My patience is wearing thin. This is how it played out actually on CNN, with probably one of the most pompous guys you will ever see talking about it on their program.
I don't think scolding is the approach. There are these purveyors of misinformation out there, and they're not just on the right. Robert Kennedy Jr. is one of the most notorious ones. And I haven't seen the president or anyone say, look, people, he's scolding the people that are being lied to as opposed to the liars. Do you know what I mean? Like, instead of saying there are a bunch of people just trying to get your money, trying to get your attention, trying to get your votes, trying to get your views and clicks, they're lying to you. Instead of shaming the liars and trying to educate the people being lied to, he's scolding the people being lied to. And again, as with the election lie, you can get mad at the people who believe the lies, but the villains are the liars.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting point. Where does...
Yeah, I think that is actually, I came a little bit critical, but I think that's a completely perfectly fair point. You gotta take a look at why this stuff's happening, and a lot of from the very beginning. If you look at what's been going on in the Republican Party in terms of media and consent manufacturing that's been so aggressive and so intense, it's absolutely right. And you can see that people are responding with all these takes, and we see Jimmy Kimmel, people who are vaccinated should not get some, or not vaccinated should get less healthcare treatment. That is just really insane stuff that just does not have any basis on just common humanity, I think personally. But when it comes down to it, what you're going to need to do is get these people to get shots in their arms, especially with the more hardcore people. Making a convincing case about why some of the biggest lies. It depends on the population, and depends on the audience very, very differently. Because if you look at a lot of the people now, African American community really taking it up, despite some, of course, the conservative media having a great time, if you've noticed, with the past few weeks competing, throwing that rather out-of-date stat around that was, Black Americans are the least likely to take a vaccine. Rightfully so. The deep mistrust. No, but they have really actually taken up this vaccine due to, if you look at where I'm from, if you listen to put on any rap radio station, which I do, because I don't know if listen to any of my other podcasts, but I'm a rap fan. There are just so many doctors. Massive amounts of public service ads being here's why the vaccine is good for you. You're good. This is a good product. It won't let you down. I understand why you have hesitancy about it, actually acknowledging it, Jake Tapper saying. But if someone did that, on the the country radio stations of the South or whatever, Trump country, that could maybe have some sort of an impact or some sort of the ideas there have been discussed. They will be discussed, but I definitely agree with that point now. Really, one of the only instances where I completely changed my mind on a clip, having just read a caption from Aaron Rupar and Twitter, but which is never a good thing to do if you're out there, if you're a Twitter news consumer. But anyway, good for Jake Tapper, making a really great point there. Anyway, let's move on to our next story, and we will in just a minute.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our segment to tell you all about what's going on here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network this summer. We do, as I'm sure you know, have a great lineup available for you. We, of course, start with our flagship show, Newsflash, all new Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Uncultured, irregularly back every Saturday with live music and sports analysis with my co-host for the summer, Bennett Laxton. Hidden History will be brand new every Thursday on a bit of a hiatus, but will return shortly. It's the summer of podcasting. It's the summer of sounds. All you got to do is just keep listening wherever you get your podcasts, always here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network.
And as that summer winds down and we get in the fall, you can really take a look at some of the whole collection of sorts, I guess you could say, of the Hidden History catalog. It's kind of complete now. Full season 2, full season 1, available wherever you get your podcast. All right, so we got a very interesting interview out in NPR, and that is with the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. Let's get into it here. So, NPR writing, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer said he will retire on his own terms he calls for progressives for him to step down from the court so President Biden can name a younger liberal to take his place. And of course, that comes after the horrific, insane, pretty much overturning of Roe v. Wade. No abortions after 6 weeks. That's 2 weeks late on a period, as AOC said about a week ago or so. Very convincing and effectively. Really making the case and making a whole lot of people, Republicans who want, really pissed off about what's happening, because they may not have had the complete headlines of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, but I would say the media pretty much covered it as an overturning of Roe v. Wade. But we have what happens so quickly in America with kind of left movements of genuine outrage, which is the Democratic Party completely comes in the way and just slows down all momentum because people want to do something. They obviously look, the first thing is to the government, to the party who would be naturally supportive of them, the Democratic Party, and they're just not in a position to do everything. And a lot of that is because of Joe Biden. Pretty much all of it is because of Joe Biden, his refusal to move, his refusal to push in any way, and the very fragile, arguably self-constructed barriers he's put up in front of him towards actually getting anything done. And it, of course, includes the filibuster, stopping him from getting done pretty much his entire agenda, making him so much more likely to be crushed in the midterms. And this is another great example of it. Abortion in danger, very easy to pass it through a government that Democrats control, really codifying the law, codifying Roe v. Wade into law. Roe v. Wade itself, the court case, was never really a solid, legal defense for abortion. So that's why it's been so much under threat. Not to mention, the zealotry of the Christian right and how it's pretty much captured not just the court, but so much of the lower judicial system. But he did say, "I'm only going to say I'm not going to go beyond what I previously said on this subject, and that is that I do not believe I should stay on the Supreme Court or want to stay on the Supreme Court until I die." Which, at least you have some level, at least you don't have the same amount of hubris as Ruth Bader Ginsburg did. So credit to him for that, but, he's going to be staying on it for a bit of time. You can imagine, hopefully, this literally up until 2022, if, things go really bad and Biden loses the Senate, that would be a big blow. Warnock's seat goes down or something like that, and then it's a Republican Senate, and then there ain't no Supreme Court justices happening anytime soon. And then, it's on to the next Republican administration after that. But really dangerous situation. He says, "And when I should retire or will retire has many complex parts to it. I think I'm aware of most of them, and I am and will consider them." So let's take a look at a little bit of what he has to say.
You did pretty well in the 2020 term. You wrote some very important opinions on the ACA, on student speech. You have advanced some important compromises on the court.
How many of those opinions were? How many of those opinions were dissents versus whatever they call the majority opinion? I think that's what they just call the majority opinion. But anyway. Pretty much what's happening here is, and it's are we going to anger, young progressive activists? No, it's just really, people need to start realizing, what I think people don't want to realize, but it's kind of, staring them right in front of the face. They're getting a sense of it, just, struggling to come to terms with it, but I think really should have come to terms with it after the Supreme Court decision. But pretty much what it shows, I think, is that there is no real adult in the room. There's no, kind of person who's going to come and say, you know what, you all got to calm down. Abortion, it's only fair. Women have to have it. Sorry, Republicans. You just got to give that up. No savior is coming for that. It's going to come with the Supreme Court because the Republicans capture the Supreme Court. They have pretty much large parts of the judiciary, and, Democrats have a lot of, finger pointing inwards to blame for that. Just like they do for pretty much, everything else in this whole situation, whole predicament they're in, because there is no person who, really, the only thing that matters, it's not the Constitution, rule of law, whatever, it's pretty much, the only thing that matters is who has the, balls, political power, smarts to get away with it. That is what's happening. Right now, Republicans have shown, they got the court, they are, pushing these laws. They've done this, 40-year, incredibly well-funded, big business, Christian right, building over years and years funded plan to get this stuff done. Democrats have been, knocked out of the water for it. That's the only thing at play here. There's no Constitution. There's no Supreme Court, writing, dissenting, and analyzing opinions. And that's something that people like Stephen Breyer do not understand, because the whole point of them is uphold this noble, apolitical, beyond partisanship body that is what the Supreme Court is supposed to be. But in the end of the day, what you get down to is the fact that Stephen Breyer is, pretty much useless as well. Well, it's going to be a 6-3 court, and he's on it. Simple as that.
So, at least as I look at things now, I would guess that at some time relatively early in the upcoming term, you will announce plans to retire. Am I wrong?
I'm only going to say that I'm not going to go beyond what I previously said on the subject, and that is that I do not believe I should stay on the Supreme Court or want to stay on the Supreme Court until I die. And when exactly I should retire or will retire has many complex parts to it. I think I'm aware of most of them, and I am and will consider them.
Well, what are the factors that a justice...
Oh, there are quite a few, and I'm not going beyond what I said for the simple reason that I would like this interview to be about my book.
So...
Yeah, so there we go. That is the guy who is pretty much holding back the fate of so many of America's most important issues. Somebody who, his only communicates to the public that, he has so much, by the way, undue, unelected influence over, is to promote his book. What a guy. Gotta love him. Yeah, so he goes, and really it shows you how delusional, or either delusional or, deceitful he is about some of what he's saying here, is because if you look at some of this, he says, but this is the NPR article, but Breyer didn't. Breyer said being on the court's minority didn't deter him because about half our opinions, almost half, are almost always unanimous. So again, the ones that don't matter, or the ones that just complete obvious, complete perfect handouts to big business, whatever needs to be done there. I see it as trying to decide this case and trying to decide the next case. And we might be the greatest of friends and allies beyond belief on case 1 and 2. We may be on absolute opposite sides on another, case 3. But an NPR analysis of the court's last term found that justices swerved to the right, even by the standards of the traditionally conservative Roberts Court. Pretty much being conservative on everything that matters, throwing a few, PR victories, on Obamacare, preserving a lot of the private health system in the first place, by the way. But while there was unanimity on statutory matters, there's a justice split, again, that's really what it is. They deal with a lot of, kind of BS crap that just goes through. The justice split along ideological lines in high-profile, politically charged cases such as voting rights. Justices are appointed for life, but a justice can decide to retire at any time, and progressives had hoped to push Breyer in that direction. One sent a Supreme Court, one of those billboard trucks driving around the Supreme Court with a message saying, "Breyer retire, it's time for a black woman Supreme Court justice," in reference to the president's vow to nominate a black woman to the court. Really trying his damnedest not to do that at the moment. Only a handful of Democrats have suggested they'd like to see Breyer, who was nominated by Bill Clinton, retire of his own accord. The White House says that Biden's view is, it's up to him, because that's probably the key presidential thing. I don't know if maybe some calls have been made. I mean, I wouldn't be super surprised, but then again, I really would not be surprised if no calls had been made and nobody bothered to do anything at all. All right, let's move on to another interesting story. A lot of people, on the right wing, they were really getting excited about, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen out in California for my guy Larry Elder trying to win the government, California government campaign or gubernatorial office, governorship, I guess you could say, with like 20% of support. So this is in Politico. California Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, appears in a favorable position to stave off recall in next week's election, according to a University of California at Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies poll released on Friday. Roughly 60% of likely voters said they opposed recalling Newsom, compared to 38.5% who supported removing Newsom and filling his term with someone else. Only 1.4% of respondents said they had yet to make up their minds, a sign that Republicans may have a difficult time unlocking significant last-minute momentum ahead of the contest, which is again next Tuesday. The pollster reported that close to 2 out of the 5 respondents had already submitted their vote, further suggesting the portion of votes were really not up for grabs anymore. They did note that the day-to-day electorate is shaping up to be pro-recall based, day of is shaping up to be pro-recall based on survey results, which makes sense, kind of seeing some of the late-breaking support. But again, this has been a shift. So, and a lot of these votes are mail-in. Likely the mail-in is going to be more pro-Newsom, so not really mattering too much. But there has been a sizable shift in Newsom's favor since the previous IGS poll, co-sponsored by the LA Times, released at the end of July. That survey showed the anti-recall effort holding just a 3-point advantage over the anti-Newsom forces among likely voters, spurring heartburn among Democrats and then kind of prompting them to up their game a little bit with their base of supporters. Kamala Harris, who previously represented California in the Senate, campaigned alongside Newsom earlier this week in the San Francisco Bay Area, and Joe Biden is going to be arriving on Monday in an attempt to further shore up support for the big-time Democratic governor. Friday's survey does track with a separate poll released earlier this month by the Public Policy Institute of California, who found that he was up 58% on anti-recall forces, and the kicking Gavin Newsom out was at 39%. But still, it is definitely the latest sign of good news for Newsom. Nevertheless, President Donald Trump and others will be laying the groundwork to claim the recall results will be fraudulent, potentially muddying the waters. It's going to be another big stop the steal test. We see Donald Trump on it. We see, Larry Elder saying, we know they're going to cheat. That is already a great sign. It's going to be a pretty interesting test to see, if Republicans really do have the momentum. Do they have the, political will to be this crazy and carry out these massive, efforts every single time they lose a major election, to say everything was fraudulent? That, because that could really, that would put us in, I think, legitimately uncharted territory in terms of every single election is a massive court fight. And, a lot of times they're going to be something that are probably going to get through just because of the way the infrastructure of America works. So definitely a thing to keep an eye on in the future. We will be back for the last story in 20 seconds.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh.
It's news flash.
Oh, yes it is. And today is Friday, September 10th, and tomorrow is Saturday, September 11th, the 20th anniversary. This year, 2021, being the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks. And now I'd like to read to you a great article from Jon Schwarz about this situation. On September 11th, 2001, I woke up around 8:30 a.m., took a shower, and made a mug of Nescafe instant coffee. By the time I opened my laptop and moved it to Common Dreams, the favorite website of progressives of that time, still a great website, it was 9 a.m. Common Dreams was then designed with the important stories in the middle of the page with brief snippets about less significant issues on the column on the left. It was the left column that featured one sentence in red: plane hits World Trade Center. This gave me 3 minutes of delicious ignorance, during which it was possible the plane had hit the World Trade Center's North Tower by accident. 3 minutes to live in the post-9/11 era without realizing it. Then, in 9:03, like everyone who turned on the television, I saw the United Flight 175 smash into the South Tower. I soon left my apartment and walked to 7th Avenue, where there was an unobstructed view of Fulton Street 2 miles to the south. What I'd seen on TV was also there, in reality, thousands of people dead or about to die in the most excruciating way possible. I thought about that moment in one way or another every day since. As a closeted, white, male, college-educated American, I'd had fulsome opportunities to consume history's many hideous events mediated through movies and books. Yet the mortifying truth is that I never generally understood, not just with my brain, but also in my stomach and intestines, that all the victims of all of them were as real in every way as I am. World War II, I realized, was not a long-running show on the History Channel. The Rwandan genocide was not just a movie starring Don Cheadle. The El Mozote massacre was not a artful article by Mark Danner in The New Yorker. Before long, I was back in my building where my upstairs neighbor was describing her morning to several attentive listeners. She'd been at her job at one of the top floors of the World Trade Center, South Tower, at 8:46 a.m., and by happenstance was glancing out the window at the North Tower as American Flight 11 flew into it. Oh my God. She said she and her co-workers were advised not to evacuate, but half of them did anyway. Jesus Christ. And had made it down the stuffy stairwell. To below the 78th floor, the building was hit by Flight 175, so they lived. Jesus. If they had not made it below the 78th floor, they would have been toast. Yeah, they would have been completely toast. She just walked home as the South Tower collapsed behind. Jesus Christ. And there she was, in her wee Greenwich Village apartment, every inch utilized like a cabin on a ship. She'd been grazed by the wings of, not the angel of death exactly, since that constantly visits everywhere on Earth, but, you know, a more specific celestial being, the angel of humanity's love of ultra-violence. And there I was, almost exactly the same as her. My monkey brain slowly reasoned to herself, if it could almost happen to me, it could happen to her. Sorry, if it could almost happen to her, it could happen to her. And if it could happen to her, it could happen to me. That night, I dreamed that I was in Baghdad. The U.S. was about to start bombing, and though I ran, I could not escape. We know now that later in the day, then Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was barking instructions at one of his minions, who faithfully wrote them down. The minion's notes, later obtained by a blogger via a FOIA request, included this line of Rumsfeld's: "Go massive, sweep it all, things related and not." And ever since I read that, I pondered the question, what exactly was this it, related to 9/11 and not, that Rumsfeld was so desperate to sweep up? And why did we have to keep at it for 20 years at the cost of $8 trillion and 1 million lives? And there's a spectrum of possible answers. Some of them are quasi-rational and are articulated in the effluvia, that's quite a word there, continually generated by the U.S. foreign policy apparatus. But I've come to believe that we can't stop there, and a deeper, more accurate explanation can be only found in the murky psyches of people like Rumsfeld at the top of U.S. society. Rumsfeld himself wrote a memo months before 9/11, which explained the core problem facing the U.S. after the collapse of the Soviet Union is there were now new regional powers arming to deter us from bringing our conventional nuclear power to bear in a regional crisis. In other words, we did not face the threat of being attacked, rather, we faced the threat of being deterred by other countries when we wanted to attack them. The same perspective was expressed in great length as Rebuilding America's Defense, as a famous paper produced in 2000 by the Project for a New American Century, which is pretty much a neoconservative think tank. First of all, it stated in bold, at present, the United States faces no global rival. America's grand strategy should aim to preserve and extend this advantageous position as far into the future as possible. Pretty much saying that we have to be constantly looking around the globe for people who are going to, try and usurp us as the number one power. So there was a snake in this Garden of Eden. Technological developments might soon allow lesser states to deter U.S. military action. That was a big thing people wanted to realize. This was too brutal of a worldview for American politicians to articulate, but it was at least logical. We're going to run the world for as long as possible, and therefore it's impermissible for countries we don't like to prevent us from bombing them. That's pretty much what it means there, if you think about it. Things went downhill from there. However, in a 2004 Esquire article, a senior Bush administration official explained why the U.S. had needed to invade Iraq. It turned out the Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein continuing to exist in power resulted in a very bad message to the world, including that to Islamic terrorists that America could be defied. This emotionalism about Saddam was bipartisan. In 1993, the Clinton administration proclaimed that Iraq, having been defeated in the 1991 Gulf War by George H.W. Bush, had tried to assassinate former President George H.W. Bush, while the elder Bush had been taking a victory lap in Kuwait. This later turned out to have been just pretty much made up in the same way that pretty much all the tales during Bush II's administration were about Iraq. As the New Yorker reported at the time, they were furious about Saddam's near suicidal defiance of American pressure. Many officials in the Pentagon and State Department have become increasingly angry with Iraq in the early months of the Clinton administration, feeling Saddam had been getting away with things. This is clearly not the language of adults discussing how to deal with other adults. Rather, it's a mindset of frustrated parents whose children won't do what they're told. Even this, though, was more sober than the quasi-sexual perspective of the others in the U.S. foreign policy establishment. Thomas Friedman, the three-time Pulitzer-winning New York Times columnist, probably everyone who's opened a page in New York Times has heard of this guy. Very influential guy, especially in media and policy circles. Obama loved him. He said, just after the invasion of Iraq, we needed to go over there basically and take out a very big stick right in the heart of the world, or that world, he said. Take out a very big stick right in the heart of that world and say, well, suck on this. This is pretty much about, whipping, like literally whipping, the Middle East into quote-unquote American shape. This, after 9/11, after our people were blown up in ways that, America never could have thought possible, the response to the top of government, that's not, they saw it as an excuse to remind America who was boss. That's what, or not remind America, but remind the rest of the world for, who was boss. Whenever you think about the way 9/11 played out, I think, obviously, the only thing you can think about it is that it's complete and total tragedy. That is, we still have not, completely processed today. But, as we get close to this era, I think it really is poetic, the fact that we are now, right around this time, taking troops out for the first time of the Middle East, or not for the first time in the Middle East, but in the really one of the biggest ways yet, ending our involvement in Afghanistan. And, starting to come to terms with the fact that something that we really could not come to terms with the fact that we, especially after 9/11, especially after we got that one big gut punch that all those neocons feared, was that America is not and can't be that power that, PNAC and all those people are talking about in, the one world bestriding colossus, as it was called, after the Soviet Union. Can't be that way. Cannot be that way anymore. We are trying to come to terms with that. And the question is, how will we do that? And I think that big step Biden made after 9/11, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, finally getting these troops out and saying, our adventures in this area, not convincingly saying it, in my opinion, waffling back and forth, but taking that step and forcing Americans to really consider for the first time that our role, although you could argue they've been ahead of the game with the politicians on this, is that, our role as being the world police, the people in charge, that role is gracefully and mercifully coming to the end. And may that role, which is going to end so much, terror and destruction abroad, play a role in stopping some more terror and destruction here in so many different ways. Thank you so much for listening. It's so great to be back on the air. I don't know about a regular schedule yet, but it was a very, very big pleasure to do this episode.